Before we start, I've got a question for you. Do you like stories of epic fantasy with deep, character driven narratives? If so, then I'd like to direct you to the Seeker saga, written by yours truly. Set in a world of gods and monsters called Theral, the Seeker saga follows heroes across the ages as they fight to save their homes from the machinations of wicked forces. Book 1 follows a young man and his companions on their quest to save the sun god and restore daylight to the world. Book 2 follows a young woman with a mysterious past as she sets out to uncover the truth of her origins and the massacre of her tribe. Book 3 follows a newly appointed knight who finds herself torn between her morals and her duties as her country teeters on the brink of civil war. Finally, my upcoming 4th book follows a man set on revenge against those who left him to rot in prison, only to discover that their betrayal was all part of a much larger scheme. Despite the numbering, there's no hard reading order. With each book following a different protagonist in a different part of Theral, you can jump right in wherever you'd like. So, what are you waiting for? I'll put links in the description for you to browse at your leisure. Now, on with the video. The Tournament Arc. A popular trope in anime and manga, to be sure. It's typically defined as a point in the story in which the main characters have to go through a series of fights or competitions in rapid succession, usually in the form of a grand contest, or, a tournament. Tournament arcs are usually used as a means for the main characters to showcase the status of their growth, be it how their techniques have improved since the start or what lessons they've learned along their journey. It usually only lasts for a few episodes or chapters, but a good tournament arc can easily become a highlight of the narrative. One series, however, dared to ask the question, what if the entire narrative was a tournament arc? Enter Record of Ragnarok, otherwise known as Shimetsu no Valkyrie, a manga series created by Shinya Imamura and Takumi Fukui in 2017 as part of Koa Mix's monthly comic Zenin. The premise goes as follows. The gods, like all the gods of all the religions, hold a council to decide whether or not to exterminate humanity. Just as it seems like they're going to vote in favor of this genocide, however, the Valkyrie Brunhilde steps up to propose a compromise. The Ragnarok Tournament. Humanity would choose the spirits of 13 of their greatest representatives throughout history to go up against 13 deities in a series of death battles. And if the humans won more bouts, the species would be spared. It's a pretty simple but engaging premise. The best of human history against the best of mythology. And yes, the series has often been likened to Fate, albeit without all the convoluted Nasuverse lore that can be so daunting to newcomers. I was introduced to the series by a friend on Discord, and nearly instantly fell in love after witnessing the action scenes. And let's not mince words here, the fights are absolutely Ragnarok's biggest selling point. There are other elements to enjoy for sure, but if you're reading this manga, then you're probably here for the action first and foremost. Unfortunately, while I can appreciate a story that's mostly out to create a spectacle and embraces that, I found myself growing less and less enamored with Ragnarok over time, and that sentiment seems to have been shared by plenty of its readers. This video is going to delve into exactly why, though I should warn you now that we will be discussing spoilers for pretty much the entire manga so far, so if you want to go in blind, consider this your one and only warning to back out. We good? Okay. So right out of the gate, let's just address one of the biggest issues that I and several others have with this story. The roster. We are given the full list of fighters for both sides of the conflict very early on. All 13 gods and all 13 humans. We aren't told the exact matchups, so there's some excitement in regards to finding out who will fight who. But Record of Ragnarok at least tells us who to expect right from the jump. As you look over the roster for both sides, though, you may notice certain trends with the character choices. To start with, they're all dudes. Both sides have chosen exclusively guys and male deities to fight for them. At the risk of sounding woke, or whatever major buzzword is used nowadays, I think this is ridiculous. Like, I wouldn't even mind if the majority were guys, but come on. You have a total of 26 potential combatants in your story, pulled from all of history and mythology, and you couldn't be bothered to have even one iconic female warrior or one notable goddess? This is made even more absurd, in my opinion, by the fact that some of the reps aren't even fighters to begin with. I mean, seriously, Brynhilder chose guys like Rasputin and Nostradamus to partake in the big death battle tournament? Really? I know the series gives these non-combatants ways they can fight, like putting Nikola Tesla in a mech suit or giving Shin Shi Huang his special martial art, but I'd still happily trade them out for fighters like, I don't know, Queen Boudica, Chiang Sao, or Tomoe Gozen. Likewise, the deities could have probably benefited from employing some infamously ruthless goddesses like Sekhmet, Kali, or the Morrigan. On the matter of the gods, though, let's take a look at their representatives. You've got Zeus, Poseidon, Apollo, and Heracles on the list. And then later on, when Buddha switches sides, they add Hades to the lineup. That's a total of 5 Greek deities out of 13, which is absolutely wild to me, especially since one of them is the god of freaking poetry. Like, guys, you have all of mythology to pull from. Why are you focusing so heavily on just one pantheon? What about Celtic lore? Or Mesoamerican? Sumerian? Hell, there's gotta be someone in Chinese myth you could work with. Mind you, the overall character roster may not matter so much when many of the characters start to feel kind of samey. Record of Ragnarok leans very heavily on subversive humor. But the issue with that is the humor no longer feels subversive when it becomes expected. The characters in this series range from iconic leaders to honorable warriors to straight up deities. A lot of them are people that you'd expect to have dignified, refined, or composed personalities. So why do so many of them talk like angsty teens and wannabe gangsters? Now, admittedly, this may just be a result of the English translations for the manga, but so much of the dialogue from these characters comes off as needlessly crass. Like, I'm not some prude who can't handle a bit of cursing or slang now and then, but seriously, it starts to get a little tiresome after a while. I mean, even the Buddha has the attitude of a high school delinquent. You know, the guy whose whole thing is inner peace and tranquility. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some characters I think that are fantastically well written, but others just kind of wind up feeling like carbon copies of one another. Finally, let's discuss the fights themselves. Now, I will say that a lot of the fights in this series are genuinely pretty great. Adam versus Zeus, Jack versus Heracles, and Tesla versus Beelzebub are some standouts to me. Even if I think the ending to the last one was kind of BS, but whatever. Some of the fights, though, well, they tend to feel like wasted potential. Like, seriously, they pitted Raiden Tamimon, a famous sumo wrestler, against Shiva, a god with multiple arms. And it's basically just a punch fest. Seriously? You had the opportunity to turn this into an actual sumo death match with a lethal ring out gimmick, and you just have them punching one another. Oh, yeah, that's another thing. The gods and the humans are allowed to request the arena to be changed into a specific type of environment to give their fighter the edge in a given match, with the caveat that doing this lets the other side choose the arena in the next match for free. It's a neat premise that offers a number of interesting fight locales, even if it has to be used somewhat sparingly. But for whatever reason, the arenas in which a possible ring out could have been a thing are reserved for Sasaki versus Poseidon and Tesla versus Beelzebub. And neither one of them actually really utilize that gimmick all that much. Finally, there's the reveal of the grander plot, which is something I have a lot of complicated feelings about. So basically, it turns out that in this world, there were 4 primordial gods that predated all the others. And ironically enough, these 4 decided long ago that the lesser deities should be eradicated. This initiated the original Ragnarok, a big battle between all the deities that resulted in the 4 primordials getting sealed away. Those 4, however, managed to scatter their weapons across the world in the hopes of one day possessing anyone foolish enough to wield them. One of these weapons, Grom, was found and wielded by Odin, who became obsessed with trying to break the seal. Yep, it turns out that Odin is the true big bad of the series, and his goal is to wipe out humanity to use their collective life forces to unleash the primordials. The council at the start of the series was evidently instigated by him, and humanity's worthiness to exist was really just a front to justify harvesting their souls. While I do have some issues with how the mythology is handled overall, I can at least appreciate that the story is building up to something grander than just the tournament. To be honest, that's been foreshadowed for a while now, though the story is quite eager to dump a lot of its exposition toward the end of the tournament. Granted, exposition has always been something Record of Ragnarok handles a little less than gracefully, interrupting fights to have whole chapters dedicated to telling us a character's backstory, or the author's reinterpretation. I suppose that's kind of inevitable, though. Tournament arcs are typically meant to feature a bunch of pre-established characters, but this series has to handle introducing its cast and getting us invested in them all in the span of basically a single battle. So, where do I actually stand on Record of Ragnarok? Well, at the time of this recording, the series isn't actually complete just yet. While I am somewhat intrigued to find out where everything's going, I can't deny that my investment has dwindled since I first started reading. It's an interesting premise, the fight scenes are generally pretty hype, and the art's not half bad either. My main gripes really boil down to a somewhat inconsistent tone, awkward pacing, and a roster that I feel could have really used some change-ups. But what do you all think? What are your thoughts on Record of Ragnarok? Am I being too harsh? Do you agree with my criticisms? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and until next time, stay bright.